Good evening, guys. Right, so none of Pete's 1 in 500 were correct. There's another one, but you have to bear with me to get there eventually. On the train here, I was thinking, right, I go there. Now, who on earth would come and listen on an evening where you actually can go anywhere, come and listen to a rail managing director instead of going to a pub or going to a nice restaurant or have an enjoyable hour with a couple of friends. So my expectations, even though you told me that 100 or so have signed up, my expectations were not quite there. But looking at this room, I must say, guys, I'm really overwhelmed. And if indeed I'm looking at a group of future leaders here, well, that's pretty reassuring. And I'm really, really pleased to be here. So I'm going to talk to you a little bit, but the brief was, can you talk for 40 minutes? And then it'll be about 20 minutes for questions and answers. Now, interestingly, when I was a slightly younger manager, I attended a meeting with my big boss at the time, who was a CEO, and we had a delegation of McKinsey consultants. Have you heard of McKinsey? Yeah. McKinsey, they came in to present a really valuable proposal to him. And this man was rather abrupt, and he said, right, okay guys, what are you going to tell me? And I said, oh, we've got this wonderful proposal. How long do you need for that? And they said, about 40 minutes. He said, right, if you can't get your message across in 5 minutes, you're wasting my time, so please leave. So I'm somewhat traumatized by the 40 minutes, but I shall try and get over that and do my best. Right then, leadership roles I've held from varied indeed, because I started my working career as a senior police officer in the wonderful city of Rotterdam, and then moved into rail operations, believe it or not, and did a bit in aviation as well. And I worked in various countries in Central Europe and the UK. But some of the most valuable lessons I've learned as a leader, as a manager, they came over the last 3.5 years while I've been managing director of London Midland. And I'll come on to explain to you why that is in a moment. Let me just, for those who are not totally familiar with the company, with London Midland as a company, how many of you have actually used London Midland trains? Hands up. See, that's great. That's great, because Pete travelled to London with Chiltern Railways. How many of you have used Chiltern Railways? Right answer. Thanks very much. You're making very, very, very well answered. Right. Let me just set the scene a little bit. That is for the company. We run trains from Liverpool to London and across the whole of the West Midlands, from Hereford and Shrewsbury in the west, to Ruisley, Lichfield and Nuneaton on the other side, so in the east. We operate as what we call a rail franchise. Now, if you're not sure what that means, my simple answer is to think of it as a large government contract. And it's a pretty big government contract, because our turnover is £400 million a year. That's turnover, not profit, so remember that. We carry about 65 million passengers every year, a figure that has grown by about 1/3 since we started our franchise back in 2007. So I would think that's pretty impressive growth when you consider that during nearly all of that time, the UK was in the grip of the worst recession in the living memory of most of us. And if that's my living memory, I'm probably older than you most, so it must be yours as well. We run over 1,300 services every day, so that's 1,300 different train services, serving the UK's two biggest cities, London and Birmingham. And don't let anyone tell you ever that the rail industry in the UK is not competitive, because it is. Birmingham to London is probably the most competitive rail market in the UK, with 3 different train operators, each one of them offering something slightly different to the customer. And if you've travelled with all 3 of them, then you probably know why you pick one, why you pick the other at other times. Virgin, which you probably know, with its fast point-to-point service aimed at the higher end of the pricing spectrum. Chiltern, just mentioned, offers a slower, less expensive service through the Cotswolds to London Marylebone, so it's a very picturesque, very lovely journey to go on. And then there's London Midland, very much the no-frills operator. We're not quite as fast as the other two, but we do offer you the chance to join at intermediate stations, so we stop at more stations. And also, we're the cheapest in the market, and this is despite having some of the newest trains on the Birmingham to London route. In fact, we launched another £62 million worth of new trains investment on the route just about 6 months ago in December to help deal with the growth in passenger numbers we're seeing on our service. So great has been the demand for our services that this year we completely reviewed the whole timetable with the benefit of new trains to be added, and we added an additional 138,000 seats per week to our network, which is pretty substantial, I would have thought. Our value for money offer has recently been praised in his personal blog by no less than Anthony Smith, who you probably wouldn't have heard of. If you have, well done. But he's the chief executive of what's called the Transport Focus. So they are the independent watchdog, if you like, of the public transport industry. And so it's not something you expect to see every day from the main man of our official watchdog. Now, why am I telling you this? That's because, like any MD probably, any managing director of any company, you would expect me to be really proud of the company I'm representing. And I am. But I'm talking about where we are today. And with train performance continuing to improve, with reliability of our services at industry-leading low levels. No, it's high levels actually. It's cancellations at low levels. But what makes me even more proud than that is how far we've come in just a few years' time. You see, 3 years ago, this same company, London Midland, was the worst performing train company in the country. When I arrived in early 2012, the writing was already on the wall. The franchise had been faltering since the very start. And in fact, you know you're in trouble when you are a statistic on a program that's called Mock the Week. Has anyone heard of Mock the Week? You have. Right. Oh. Next. See if it works. Here we go. It's very, so can we?
How many miles would the proclaimers realise they'd made a massive mistake?
How many of my sexual fantasies involve my partner? To be honest, in that one, she's introduced me to her sister.
Is it how many traffic wardens will make it to the kingdom of heaven? Is it how many of Jeremy Clarkson's thoughts are about something other than himself? and that one is about a car.
Isn't it we're all after a partner who's 1 in a million? What will most of us settle for?
What proportion of complaints to the BBC are about Adrian Childs' face being broadcast before the watershed?
How many documentaries on the History Channel aren't about pharaohs or the Nazis?
How many Star Trek fans have touched a real woman?
Did you say that in such a camp way?
Is it how many Daily Mail readers have first-hand experience of what they're outraged by?
What is the last response you want to the question, what are my chances, Doctor?
Is it the number of London Midland trains that were running last Sunday?
You're absolutely right, Andy.
Yes, the question I was looking for was how many of London Midland's Sunday train services running as normal last weekend. Thousands of people were forced to cancel travel plans or put up replacement buses after London Midland cancelled all but one of its 500 services.
On the plus side, it was the first time this year that London Midland only had one train that was actually running late.
Right, now on that note, you'll probably all agree that that really is a low point for just any company. Well, it certainly was for ours. And Frankie Boyle, as well as his other mates, had a field day that episode at our expense. Now, this should, of course, have been a warning shot that there were problems, underlying problems, with the fundamentals of our organisation. Oh! What am I doing wrong? How do I go back? Oh, I'll just use this. That's it. Thank you. Thank you. Sorry, guys. I'm better at running train companies. But as, like I say, it should have been a warning shot. But as so often happens in business, you have some more successes, and the earth tremor is quickly discounted as a one-off. There was a lot of investment at the time in new trains on the Snow Hill lines, and we speeded up our services on the West Coast Main Line, all at the same time. We became the industry leaders in the use of social media. Our Twitter team was award-winning. We had a marketing team, marketing fantastic campaigns and services, and they won many awards. New markets opened up. Suddenly, we were in the long-haul business and providing passengers with a cheaper alternative, and were giving Virgin real competition. Passenger numbers were at an all-time high. By the early part of 2012, Transport Focus was praising London Midland for having the most improved passenger satisfaction rating in the country. So from the outside, my first few months at London Midland looked pretty good, because I joined them early 2012. We even, the same year, because with the big Olympics, London Olympics, we had a highly successful London Olympics. Now, why would a train operating company have a successful Olympics, you're asking? But it wasn't just competed on the track and field, but also on the rails. Commentators, media critics, have been extremely cynical of the London bid for the Olympics from early days, citing the capital's poor public transport facilities. They were proved wrong. We, the rail industry, joined together, and we had meetings with Boris Johnson, and I remember them well, at the London Assembly, and we were talking about what we are going to do to prove them wrong. And we actually made it, or created, what we call the Transport Games to deal with the public transport challenge. And we did really well. For 6 weeks, through the Olympics and Paralympics, we put in a terrific performance. But came at a price. For 6 weeks, all leave, all holidays for our frontline staff had been cancelled. So, right guys, we need you all on board. We need you to roll your sleeves up, because we cannot afford and cannot allow this to go wrong. So with extra services, there was also a lot of overtime for these guys to be had. Colleagues worked long hours and lots of what we call rest days, and also made a bit of extra money, a nice bit of extra money over that period. At the end of the heady period, we had lots of staff, therefore with a healthy bank balance, but also with a backlog of holidays to take. And they did not only take them, they also turned down any request to work overtime after the Olympics. Something the industry, and I'm talking about the rail industry as a whole, had become heavily reliant upon. And London Midland in particular could not manage without people working overtime to be able to provide normal services. So this storm, and we started, actually we were coming to what we later called a perfect storm, but that storm was added to by the fact that we had taken our eye off the ball when it came to staff turnover, so people leaving the company, particularly in a mission critical area called train drivers. I mentioned earlier the competitive nature of the modern rail industry. In the West Midlands alone, and that's not on the route from Birmingham to London, but in the West Midlands, there are 5 train operating companies all competing for the same market. And that's excluding freight rail companies. All of them need train drivers. And without going into too much detail, among the train driving community, there has always been an understanding, you could call it, you know, sort of career aspiration, that you start your career on local trains and then after a while you work your way up to longer distance trains, intercity trains. That career path, or link progression as we call it, has always been there. Drivers knew this. Somehow, we as a company had forgotten that. And at the end of 2012, the perfect storm was then made complete when we had a spike in both the number of drivers moving to other train operating companies, number of drivers taking early retirement, and also we had, and that was a, you know, sort of almost a freak occurrence, we had 4 drivers within the space of 4 months passing away. To make a long story short, by Christmas of 2012, having just been praised a couple of months before that by all the media and Transport Focus to have the most improved passenger satisfaction, by Christmas of 2012 we were back to where we were in September 2009. Remember the mock the week, cancelling hundreds of trains every day. And this time it was more than just a one-day wonder, it went on for weeks. And as things got worse, we found ourselves caught in a downward spiral that we were very ill-equipped, not prepared to deal with. And during the good times, my predecessors had also cut the communications budget, probably a little bit too much. Why? They thought spend hours, if not days, talking to stakeholders and the media and politicians when things are going well. What had completely been overlooked is that you need to have goodwill of your stakeholders already in the bank when things start going wrong. Now, we hadn't been investing in this area at all, so when the bill came in, we had nothing to cover it. Nor did we have the people with the right skills and experience to help us. So the demands of rail user groups, the media and politicians just added to the workload of an already stretched management team. I call it a spiral because that's how it works. And I've seen it happening. You cancel trains, passengers complain, which is normal. You expect them to. You cancel more trains, it gets worse, and people start complaining more. And all of a sudden, otherwise benign customers discover that they have an MP or a rail user group. Have you heard of rail user groups? If you don't know what it is, you ask my head of communications, because he knows. He would say, find me a church hall anywhere within half a mile of a railway line, look inside on any given weekday evening and you will find a rail user group. They're there, and we've got many of them. Now these groups are usually friendly, they're very constructive, well-meaning people with really good understanding of railways and how to run railways, but they are very passionate about it. And they're a real asset if you work with them, but ignore them, and you ignore them at your peril. During our crisis, they become the lightning rod or gathering point for disgruntled passengers. Their voices grew and were quickly heard by the local media and then the broader media. People from the media happened to travel on our trains as well, so they had personal experience of how badly the services were run. They didn't just let it rest, so they started asking difficult questions. And altogether, they carried their voice to the politicians. They put pressure on the national politicians, who got on to the Department for Transport. And there were soon questions in the Houses of Parliament. Now, I haven't got the clip of the House of Parliament, but I could also show you the clip in 2012 and 2013 where MPs started asking questions about London Midlands and London Midlands performance. And there were many of them. The Prime Minister, David Cameron, as it happens, was openly criticising and naming London Midland in the House of Commons. Now, the bottom of the spiral was reached in early 2013, and by then my whole management team and I were, seriously traumatised, exhausted, and it wasn't a nice place to be, but hey, that's life. So it all adds to the experience as a leader, and very, very important. Anyway, I was called in, summoned to go and see the Secretary of State for Transport, a guy called Patrick McLaughlin. And I thought, right, if we have the same first name in common, then it'll probably be all right. It wasn't so pleasant. I was there with the two chief executives of my parent companies. We have, as a company, we have two shareholders, Go Ahead Group and Keolis. Both chief executives were there, I was there, and we were surrounded by quite an impressive delegation, chaired by the Secretary of State. I'd already worked out that, going in there, and the risk, the worst case, they would have taken the franchise off us and say, right, you're breaching your contract, we take it off you, and you cannot run it again. That would have been disastrous. I knew that we had only one chance to persuade the Secretary of State in that meeting that the recovery plan I'd put together, or we put together as a company, and presented to him, was the right one, and was the only possible and quickest route to recovery. That we would get on top of all the cancellations, address all the underlying issues, and critically rebuild the trust in London Midland. Patrick McLaughlin, fortunately, looked at me and said, all right then, lad, give it a go. And that was it. So I left that office, well, not totally reassured, and I was very nervous, and it was all very difficult, but at least we had a fighting chance to try and turn it around. I called the recovery plan, because we then put a really comprehensive recovery plan together. I called it Strong Foundations, and I called it Strong Foundations because I thought that was a fitting name. And it was more, and it was meant to be more than just fixing the symptoms, fixing what the passenger sees. Our analysis showed that the problems we experienced in 2012 went deep into the history of London Midland and its predecessor. In fact, some of the issues went back as far as British Rail, which was before privatisation in 1994. One of the first things we had to do, though, was to change the way we looked at driver numbers, train driver numbers. And simply focusing on how many we had, which is what we did prior to that, got us into big trouble. So when you realise that it takes, and it's slightly different with other groups of staff, but train drivers require a year of training before they can actually go out and drive a train. Recruiting train drivers in and then completing the training, so it takes a minimum of 1 year from start to finish. So if you have a problem today, and our problem was pretty big, you can't just go out there and say, right, get people in and they can drive trains tomorrow. Your problem is only going to be resolved a year after that, but that does not take into account drivers that will be leaving you between that point and the year you get the new drivers in. So you have to over-recruit and train in order to start solving the problem. So that was one. And what we committed to was to keep our driver training school, go to the next one, to keep our driver training school full, not just for the year, or during the remedial plan or the recovery plan, but for the remainder, the lifetime of our franchise. But the planning reached far beyond. We also took some measures to make it less attractive for newly appointed drivers to move on to other companies or depots. And at this point, I'm often asked the question, well, why didn't you simply pay them more? Well, the simple answer to that is we couldn't afford to pay them more. But I think the more sophisticated answer is that even if we did, it would have only sparked a price war, if you like, where train operating companies start bidding more and more and more and more for train drivers, and we would eventually lose out anyway. But the industry couldn't afford it. The only ones who would probably have benefited from it were train drivers, because they could see their salaries going up and up and up and up. But also remember the point I mentioned about driver career progression. Even if they could earn or not earn more money elsewhere, the simple fact that they wanted to progress their career and do something new, bring about some change, saw drivers leaving our company. What we said there, therefore, was, right, if we can't stop that, we've got to control it and manage it and foresee it. So at least we can plan ahead, and that's what we did. So the Strong Foundations program looked at every aspect of our business, and the most important decision, though, was that we, and I remember saying that, guys, not only do we have to put this right, but we've got to, at the same time, stop everything we're doing that is not relevant and doesn't make, or is not part of our core business, our core activities. And I also stopped them to take on any new activities or any new challenges or opportunities going forward until we knew we were stable and we could deliver the new ones. Our mantra became actually to do the simple everyday things really well, and only to do those things and no more until the business improved. We also looked at our people, their roles and their skills. I spoke to, yeah. Well, I knew there was a bit about people in there. We had, obviously, we've got 2,500 people working for London Midland, so it's quite a group of people. So there's lots of them there, but were they the right ones, doing what the business needed? Structures and processes were changed, and we had to change them, and we got new people into the business, people that did have the critical skills we required. And we invested in communications and stakeholder engagement. We realized that if we were to rebuild trust, we had to become more visible and accessible to passengers, user groups, politicians and the media, and get really proactive about it. But perhaps the biggest change we made was to create what we call the heads of route. These are, well, actually fairly simple and straightforward appointments, but we appointed 4 senior managers and made them heads of route. And each of them oversees a specific part of our network, a route. That makes sense, head of route. Their mission is to wake up each day and look at their patch and say, if I was a passenger, what would I do to improve my railway? And then they have to go out and make that happen. Mind you, they are our people, so they are very senior, they've got a lot of accountability and a lot of power, but they have to go out and make that happen. Critically, they have no line management responsibilities. And line management, with that I mean they are not responsible for large groups of people, which is important because it frees them from the shackles of paperwork and administration that normally comes with a senior management position. Unless, of course, you're the MD, and then you get other people to do that for you. Instead of that, they are charged with using their skills and knowledge to identify problems and come up with creative solutions. And there have been many. Branch lines have been transformed, poor timetables and staff rosters have been ripped up and replaced in record time. They've reached out to stakeholders and made them, and made many of them, the allies we knew they could be, and they are now. And you go and talk to our stakeholders and they all know their head of route. By having a clear geographical responsibility, it's also helped us break out of what I call being too Birmingham focused. All companies, I think, face the risk, or at least the accusation, of appearing to be more interested in the area immediately surrounding its headquarters than the rest of its operations. The head of route approach has changed that. Using their influence and skills, the heads of route have also helped us get closer to our biggest supplier, Network Rail. And the best example I can give of this is the age-old problem of leaf fall. Do you know what leaf fall is? You ever heard of, people usually start smiling when you talk about leaf fall problems in relation to the railway. In the autumn, things tend to go a little bit wobbly on the railways, and that's to do with the leaf fall and then rainfall and all that, and the rails get really slippery, and your reliability, or the safety of running trains is being affected. By working with Network Rail, last year we came up with a whole new approach to managing the leaf fall season. More than just operating a different timetable, we also looked at where the problems most likely were to occur and ensure that Network Rail had the people and equipment in the right places to give us the best possible responses and to recover our service quickly. This meant on the cross-city line, the cross-city is a line that runs from Lichfield to Redditch, roughly. On that route alone, we managed to improve autumn punctuality by 50%. And today London Midland is a very different business to the one I walked into in 2012, I'm very pleased to say. I probably wouldn't be here otherwise. Performance is up, cancellations are down, and we're seeing the benefits of investment in new trains and stations, including, just name just a few, Stratford Parkway, Kenilworth, the Ricoh Arena, very close by, Bermuda Park, another one, and without a successful London Midland recovery plan, I've no doubt that my parent companies would have found it much harder to win new franchises. I won't bore you with the detail of how you acquire, how you bid for franchises, but you've got to be credible and you have to demonstrate your capability. Having a record with London Midland like we had 3 years ago would not have put us in a very good position. It's different now. So what are the lessons I take from the last 3 years and how might they translate into your future careers? Well, you may already sit there thinking, right, how could you ever let it happen? I would have done it completely differently, which is good, because you should have done it differently. Let's start, though, at an individual level. As I said, I started as a policeman, not as a transport manager. But I was managing people. When I was in the police, I was managing people. And I've been managing people ever since. In rail, in aviation, just anywhere. The skills you learn, therefore, can be transportable and transferable, and they are. The how is down to yourselves. Nobody's going to do that for you. But you gotta challenge, you gotta push your boundaries, and you gotta look for the opportunities and take a few risks. Because if you want to learn and develop, you gotta do it yourself. Nobody. But I think you should look for the opportunities and be creative. Just go for it. This will give you a long-term advantage in a world that constantly tries to pigeonhole people. And I still see some of my former colleagues who are still senior police officers, commissioners, and I said, well, so what are you doing these days? I said, well, I run a train operating company in the UK. Oh, what's that like? Probably very similar to running a force. But they can't really see that. And then most people, once they get into a career or an industry, they stay there and don't leave. I can't see anything wrong with leaving and switching between industries and companies just to develop yourself, because that's what life is about. So your world is not defined by where you were born or where you live. I was born in the Netherlands, but I worked in many countries since, and the UK is not a very, or not the worst place to be either. I can't say, however, that I'll be in the UK for the rest of my career, because I simply don't know. If an opportunity comes about elsewhere, I might just do it, but not until London Midlands sorted, of course. Now, moving to London Midlands, I want to come back to this idea of strong foundations. It is so tempting in a busy work environment to focus on the urgent and necessary, the day-to-day, what's here, let's deal with that. And obviously that's unavoidable, because you have to. But you must also make time to look deeper into the business and look at the detail. And take the opportunity when things are going well, take the opportunity to look for ways to improve and further improve. Many companies only start realizing that they probably could have avoided, could have done things differently when it's almost too late. And I think the big challenge is to, when things are going well, not sit back and think, right, isn't life great? No, that's the time to get in there and plan for the next year and the year after and look for opportunities. If you have several near misses, you can't keep saying each one is a one-off. Yes, there may be differences, but ask, why do we get so many one-offs? Anthony Hilton, who's a former city editor of the London Evening Standard, has a saying that 2 is a coincidence, but 3 is a pattern. And I think he's right. That's when you start digging in. I would also say, look for the warning signs in unusual places. Frontline staff is a very, very good place to look. Because the guys out on the front line pick up risks and problems and issues quicker and earlier than anybody else. You won't find any textbook on management theory telling you to study mock the week. But I wonder how many London Midland managers back in 2009 who were sat in front of their TVs watching that particular episode came in the next day and said, guys, I think we need to look deeper into the problems we've got. I bet there were none. Now, we'll never know for certain, but I bet the problems of 2012 could have been largely avoided if managers had moved quicker and more boldly when the first warning signs appeared. Which brings me on to my final point. Don't ever be so wrapped up in staring at your business here and now that you forget who your friends and allies are, or could be. London Midland lost sight of the very people who could help the business, the people who could speak up on its behalf, people who could give the company the benefit of the doubt and buy the management team just a little bit more time to fix the fault. Why was that? False pride, laziness. Maybe when they were cutting back, they thought, we don't need to bother with these people. Maybe another type of pride, they're not like us. I don't enjoy engaging with these people very much, so let's just ignore them. Well, I think there's a valuable lesson to learn here for all of us, and that is you have to get along with all sorts of people in business, across borders, across cultures, across political divides, because there may come a time where you really need them. Now, it doesn't mean we will always enjoy it, but the alternative can be far worse. So my take-home message is, remember, people may not hurt you, but their ignorance will. So make the effort, get out and talk to potential allies, battle ignorance with information, generate goodwill when you can, and you and your business will be all the better for it. Future leaders, thank you very much for listening, and if there is time, I'm happy to take a few questions. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Patrick, for this lecture and all of these advices, which is really helpful for us. But I'd like to just ask a question about the trend and the competition in the market.
Yeah.
More business, more strategic question.
Oh.
Yeah. Now, you mentioned that you're going to lead now the market is more about cost leadership. It's about more differentiation, because the cost, it's a problem. But in the people issue, you mentioned that day-to-day is most important to the people because you focus on that field.
Yep.
But, and you mentioned that you have a turnover every year. If you still focus on that day-to-day, how are you going to build the future for those drivers in the organization, in your company? Is there a strategy for them to, as a current development, is there current management in the...
There is. Yes, I thought that was at least what I was trying to to say tonight, yes, we do. We now have a long-term planning. We have, in fact, we have a 5-year plan for drivers, how drivers can move between depots, and if they want to leave, they just have to let us know. If somebody says, I have an aspiration to join, say, Cross Country or Virgin Trains next year or the year after, I'm not going to say, oh no, you can't. I'd be happy for them, you know, to stay with me. But if they want to leave because they believe that is career progression, as I, you know, after a couple of years, start thinking, right, there may be something else.
Is there similar with the exit interview about something they
Yeah.
Or
And
just,
so
they need to change about money or about...
it's irrelevant, as long as they want to go. If they leave, if they want to leave because they're unhappy working for us because they don't like their boss or they don't like the accommodation or they don't like the roster, or that's something you can address. It's something you can do about. But if somebody says, I've done 6 years with London Midland, I need to change, then it's only fair, isn't it? As long as you plan for it and say, right, I know so many people are leaving, so I start recruiting and training now.
Succession planning.
So,
Do you have a
exactly.
succession planning? Or?
Succession planning.
Yeah.
Well done.
Oh.
You've learned a lot. Yeah.
It's my field.
Yeah. How's your field? We do succession planning. Yeah.
That's great. Thank you very much.
Okay.
What is the key to effectively and successfully maintaining London Midland trains? Because as a public entity, it's susceptible to depreciation, wear, tear, and damages from the public. How do you maintain them and keep it in top shape?
Oh, we have a team of about 400 fitters, engineers working for us over 3 maintenance depots where we maintain our trains. So every night, if you were to go to Tyseley depot this evening, from about 11:30 onwards, when the train service is actually starting to go down, trains start coming into Tyseley depot, and we have people at the fuel, because these are diesel trains, they need fueling. So we have people at the fuel pump filling them up, literally. Then there's a cleaning team who clean the trains. Then the train will go into the depot if they need additional maintenance. And we have a team of fitters, engineers, doing all the necessary maintenance and repairs. And then the train will go out the next day and be put ready for the service at 5 o'clock or 5:30 tomorrow morning. That's what we do. All budgeted for, because we have well, there's 2 sides to it, because the trains are not ours. The train are leased from leasing companies. So the leasing companies are 3 in the UK who own all the trains. Every train you see, even the Virgin, even the Chilterns, are all owned by leasing companies. They lease the trains to us, and they can either lease them with the maintenance included, where they do the maintenance, or say, no, you've got them, you've got the skills, you know where to maintain them best, you know when to maintain them best, so you do it yourself. And we just reserve, we create a budget for maintaining our trains, as we do, as any fleet manager would do.
Every night? Every night?
Yes, they come in every night. Well, they're not, they are cleaned every day, yeah. You're probably thinking, well, how can my train be so dirty then?
No.
Because that's what I'm thinking.
When you order your tickets online for a train,
Yeah.
you can have the option of open return or any train. How profits are divided between the companies?
Ah, very good question. Was that your question? Oh, so
The question now.
do you know each other?
No.
No, you didn't walk up here and you say, oh, I've got a really good question for later, and then he nicked it. No. Okay. There is, it's a really good question. And how do I explain this in the most simple way? Because it's complex. There is what we call the rail settlement plan. And every train operating company in the UK signs up to a membership of what's called ATOC, the Association of Train Operating Companies. And collectively, we fund the rail settlement plan. And there is a long list, it's a very long list, in fact it's a thick book that has all the rules and regulations in it of how on particular routes, revenues, as we call them, so the money coming in for tickets, is divided between the train operating companies. And it usually works really well. So they take average flows and they think, right, okay, if they travel on that route and go there, they'll do 2/3 with Virgin trains and then 1/3 with London Midland, for instance. So 2/3 go there and 1/3 goes to London Midland. Except when, and that's with the all operator tickets. So if you buy a ticket, any train ticket, then that gets divided. If, however, you buy a ticket London Midland only or Virgin only, all the money will go to Virgin only or London Midland only. So next time, guys, you buy a ticket, make sure to buy a London Midland only, because then I get all the money. Yeah.
Let's say if I order the tickets in London Midland on Virgin website, the profits will go from directly to London.
Yeah. Virgin won't take, well, they take a bit of commission, because you'll probably pay, I don't know if they charge commission. Do you pay a percent? Yeah? Okay. All right. Go on our website. Don't. We've got a much nicer website as well. Yeah. It hasn't got Richard Branson on it, but there's me.
It's the same question.
Okay. It's a good question. But it's complex. And but it goes too far, you know, to explain all this. But there are certain opportunities in the way the monies flow where you can actually influence and manipulate the system a little bit, where you run no trains at all but take a lot of revenue. But usually
Sometimes it's beneficial, sometimes it's not.
exactly. So we had a few years of a lot of benefit, and now it's the other way around. Yeah.
If your staff work overnight or something.
Overtime?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So will you inspire them? How do you inspire them? Motivation.
To work overtime?
Yeah.
To be perfectly honest, they don't need much motivation, because the extra pay they get for working overtime is more than I can ever inspire them. They say, well, yeah, take my wallet and say, does this inspire you? And they say, yeah. Well, they do to an extent. But our train drivers, anyone has any idea or hazard to guess how much the salary of a train driver is? 10? 40? 40? 30? It's 50. It's 50.
Yeah, that's good.
Basics, all right. Forget, guys, forget your future leaders, nonsense. We all want to be train drivers. 50. 50,000 pounds per year, basic.
That's yeah, let's lead the train better than.
Sorry, I can't.
How about you?
I know, guys. Just give it a chance. I know. I got you all excited, and I've got application forms with me. So afterwards, I'm joking. No, we don't. Sorry.
The contract for you now is ended. Will government take over with it, or do you sign the contract with?
All right. Our contract, the normal contract, this franchise I'm in now, expires in April next year. So the 1st of April, a new episode starts. However, there'll be what's now called a direct award contract, which is a new agreement, but it's a single tender process for those who do commercial law or commercial. Yeah. Single tender means they don't go out to the market and ask people to bid for it. There's only one party they go to, and that's us. So we're trying to negotiate a one-to-one new contract for London Midland, which we're hopefully, I'm sure we'll be successful in doing that. And that will take us to either mid-17 or mid-18, 1918. At that point, or just before that, the government, the Department for Transport, will issue a tender, an invitation to tender to the market for new parties to bid for the new franchise of London Midland. Okay? That's how it is.
Have you ever had an issue where the train breaks down in the middle of the journey?
Sorry, where?
The train breaks down in the middle of the journey. Any incident like that?
Yes, we have.
How many times?
No, well, breaking down is, my engineering director won't be happy if that happens, but it happens sometimes. But don't forget, we've got some very new trains. We have the zero trains running on the West Coast main line, so the trains to Euston, London Euston, they're very new. But we also have the trains on the Cross City line, I mentioned earlier, and those are 24 years old. They look very shiny and they look all right, but that's because we maintain them so well and we keep them so clean. But they are 24 years old. And there are reliability issues, obviously, because, you know, a 24-year-old car, the risk of it breaking down is slightly bigger than with a new car. Well, depending on which car you buy, because some new cars are likely to break down the next day. But that's what it is. It happens. But if I tell you that our reliability, and that is trains actually that would run on time, not necessarily on time, but complete the journey as per our timetable over the last year was 97.8%, which is not bad. But what it does tell you, do the numbers. You've got to do the numbers, because I have 1,300 services every day. So times whatever, 300, so it adds up to a lot of trains. If you then look at 97.4, 97.8%, but it means 2.2% did not run on time, and 2.2% of thousands of trains is still a lot of trains, which can have a lot of passengers on it. So I'll never look at the statistics only and think, oh right, so we're doing okay. Because after, you know, behind every train cancellation, behind every big delay or incident, could be hundreds, if not thousands of passengers, people affected by that failure. But it's what it is. So statistically, we're doing okay. But it happens, yes.
Okay. I was just going to ask a quick question. You mentioned the London Midland has many stops and the price is lower. So I'm just wondering, what kind of strategies do you guys implement currently, or what are you planning to do regarding to marketing? How do you attract? Why should I choose you over Virgin or many other?
It's price only.
Price only?
It's price only. It's, well,
even though
it
it's
is.
a longer journey? Is there another strategy?
Well, we did, excuse me, we introduced, I think, what was it, about 2 years ago, we introduced what we call the 110 mile per hour service, where I've got to go back 1 or 2 steps. The way it works is the timetable we have fits really well with the rest of the rail network. To change anything in the timetable, we'll have to go through a 2-year almost review process. So I can't just get up tomorrow morning and think, right, why don't we go straight, direct, express service to London, and we'll cut out a lot of journey time, and we charge a little bit more, but people get there quicker. I can't do that because I haven't got the path or the slot on the rail to do that.
Well,
so.
Do you have like a future projected plan?
Well, we do, and that's when I talked about the timetable changes. That looks at all those different aspects, and that's where the game between us and stakeholders and fares and competition comes into play. So it's a very complex but a very delicate exercise as well to look at. Pardon? More or less. Well, we do little tweaks, but they never, I mean, if they don't generate money, but cost us money, we'll probably say no. And the reason we stopped taking on new service additions or enhancements is because of what I just said. The last 2 years have all been about focus on doing what we're supposed to be doing really well first before we start doing other things. Yeah. Oh. See you. So don't worry. Oh.
You can take anybody you want.
So we're just going straight in the middle, and I'll come back to you in a minute. Yeah.
Oh. Before 2009, what went wrong with the management is wrong that make the company collapse to reach that point? The decision.
To mock the weak point. But there were two. I think there were two sides to it. One is they had when we put our plans together for the London Midland franchise, and you have to go back to 2007 when the Department for Transport went out to the market and said, guys, here's this franchise, here's an opportunity, who's interested? 6 different bidders or owning groups wanted to bid for it. They wanted London Midland, and then they run this competition where you compete for, well, subsidy, cost and proposition, and then eventually the Department for Transport will evaluate and say, you are the winner, you can now run that franchise for so many years. In that plan, you can only go by the information you are being provided, because you're not the incumbent, you're not the one running it at the moment, so you don't know what skeletons there are in the cupboard. So the plan was not quite correct. So most of the assumptions they made were fine, but some of the big assumptions were not so fine. And so when they entered the franchise and saw what really was there, thought, oh, we need to change it. But to change it, they would have to enter into negotiations with the Department for Transport to break open the contract. And they said, no, hang on a second, it's your risk, you bid for it, you've got to do it. And to do that then, they had to enter into discussions and negotiations with the trade unions, which did not go very successfully. And because of their failure to negotiate the deals with the trade unions, that is why people said, I will not come in on a Sunday then. Don't forget, the Sunday services in London Midland were all run on a voluntary basis. There is no Sunday rosters. So probably hard to imagine, but we used to rely completely on people's willingness to come in and work voluntarily overtime or rest days on the Sunday to provide our timetable service. So if they say not interested, then 1 in 500 will run. That's what happened. So there was that, and there was the the fundamental issues in the bid. So there was no money, there was no capability to deal with the issues, and I think they missed it from the very beginning. I wasn't there, so I can only, well, I know what happens. But.
Right, we've got time for 3 more. So gentleman in blue.
The lady at the back.
Lady on one side. All right then. 4. And then you're the last one.
I always wondered that, are there any specific tracks located to every service, or you guys just share the tracks, the railway?
Well, yeah, we share. Some we share, some we don't. Okay. But our fast trains, well, here's one. It's a simple one, and I'm sure you could have thought of. With an electric train, you need overhead wires. Where there are no overhead wires, you can't run an electric train. So those, although you can run diesels on an electrified route. On the West Coast Main Line, we share the West Coast Main Line probably with 5 operators. Okay. Laurel, Southern, Virgin, us, Cross Country. Yeah, but Cross Country only part of it.
So it's your like the whole train services have this thing that they have to maintain the track, or the government does that?
Network Rail do.
Okay.
Our biggest suppliers, which is government owned.
Government
Yes.
What happens, whatever happens to the track, that's the government's headache then? Not
Pardon?
yours. Whatever happens to the tracks, that's the government's headache?
We don't do that.
Okay.
No, well, we don't, but we take, obviously, responsibility for it because we sell tickets to you, and if the train breaks down, or the train breaks down, it's our responsibility. But if you can't get to your destination because the track fails, or the signal doesn't really work, then you won't be happy either. And you won't pick up the phone and call Network Rail, you'll call me, well, you might call me after tonight. Okay.
My question is, I'm a customer of London Midland regions. I was traveling during the night from Birmingham to Coventry.
Yeah. Every day?
Yes. And working day. And my question is, why in England there is no improvement on being in time, on time with train? Because they are always late.
I was complaining about this tonight.
Why in other countries, let's say for example in Germany?
Are you from Germany?
No.
Oh.
I also travel a lot.
Okay.
So they are.
I just wonder which country you're from.
I only 5 minutes once I thought I was late. And why England is such a big country with so many trains? Because your service is very good. The train service.
Thank you.
Is good.
No, she is right. She is right. Yeah. Yeah. Punctuality.
My colleagues don't travel with trains.
Punctuality is not. No, I agree. Well, 89% of our trains in the West Midlands, 89% are on time. And when we say on time, it's within 5 minutes. So it's not really, but that's it's official measure. Chiltern Railways. If you want an on-time, a punctual service, Chiltern. And the reason Chiltern, do you use Chiltern?
No.
Ah, there you go.
Only Virgin and
Well, that's good. I would use London Midland, even if they are a little bit late. Yeah. But no, but the reason I was going to explain, the reason that Chiltern run a much more punctual service is because they've got dedicated railways. They've got dedicated tracks. The Chiltern Railways, the Chiltern line, nobody else comes on. Whereas on the West Coast Main Line, there's 5 operators. If you have to run trains through Birmingham City Centre, Birmingham New Street Station, which is a bottleneck. I should have put a picture up of Birmingham New Street Station, because even though they're building this, you know, the most glamorous of shopping centres on top of it, underneath it's still very narrow, a bottleneck, and there's too many trains coming into Birmingham having to go through. So I don't know if you've ever come into Birmingham New Street with a train just running through, coming onto the platform, because every train normally is stopped outside of Birmingham New Street, waiting for the platform to clear, and then you can go in. You do that 3 or 4 times every day, and especially on a service like the Cross City, those delays will just carry on, and you get the ripple effect. Now, it's not an excuse. The reason it is because the demand for train services is so big that we have to provide a capacity, even though we know there's not enough infrastructure capacity to run the trains on time.
Is there some plans, government,
HS2,
will improve on that? Because
the high-speed line 2, the high-speed line 2 will create a lot more capacity, mainly on that particular route, which will, well, that's the idea, and it will happen, which will take the pressure off the existing routes and move some onto the high-speed lines, so that there is more capacity on the other routes to run trains on time. That is the plan. 2026, it will all be finished. So if you can leave your phone number, and you and I can catch up in 2026, we'll see if it works.
Just wonder, responsibility for the oncoming strike? For the oncoming...
Oh, for next Monday?
Yeah. Do you think, because it's just...
Yeah, I think what? Will it go ahead or will it not?
No, just because they are going on strike for full pay.
Yeah.
And your driver got paid, what, 50k a year?
Yeah.
So they won't go on strike, will they? Just Network Rail.
What, the drivers? My drivers won't.
The drivers?
No, it's just Network Rail. Yeah. Oh, it's a different company, so they have a dispute. Yeah.
But do you think as the rail operators hold any responsibility for that?
No. No, we don't. No, we don't. No. It's a very difficult question. Do you mean that because we pay people more than Network Rail, for instance, that they feel disadvantaged, or?
Yeah, Network Rail is your supplier, isn't it?
Yeah, they are.
So if they get paid better, and they will surely pay their...
But they get paid. They get paid. They get paid really well. Trust me.
Where's that coming from your understanding? The strike.
The strike?
Yeah.
Well, where do strikes? Yeah, it is. But it's almost a political question or a political item, and it's very difficult for me to. Obviously, I know a lot about the background and the detail, but it's not one for me to comment on, because it really is between the trade unions, the RMT, the rail and maritime trade unions, but it's between them and Network Rail, and they've obviously fallen out over the pay offer, and that's been rejected. They've gone out to ballot for industrial action, which has been supported by the membership, and they've now called the strike date. But they're still negotiating and talking, so we don't know. All we know is that if it goes ahead, if the strike goes ahead, there is very little we can do in terms of providing a rail service, because we cannot run.
Without their help.
And they are aware, they know that. Yeah.
Okay, follow question from that question. As part of the future plan for London Midland to stop leasing and own their own train, because that might reduce the cost of the business significantly, and the savings will pass on to the customers. Secondly, my second question is, in terms of leadership, so many trains in the train tracks and thousands of employees, what's your greatest challenge so far in managing these employees?
We'll start with the first one. The answer is no. We have no intention of buying our own trains, because it would simply be unaffordable. And you'll find that because of the running time of the franchise. Our franchise started in 2007 and expires in 2016. So for that period, it would be impossible to write off the procurement or the acquisition of trains. Trains are very expensive. So the write-off period generally, on average, is about 20, if not 25 years, which is why the industry has agreed to have leasing companies who procure the trains. They lease them out to the operators, and the operators use them for the time they run the franchise. But the ownership stays with somebody else. We couldn't afford it. And it'd be having trains on your balance sheet just make it a bit unattractive and too much risk. Because theoretically, after 7 years or 8 years, you could sit there with your fleet of new trains and you lose your contract, and the new franchisee says, no, I don't want them. And then what? I wouldn't even know where to park them. So in terms of managing employees, I think it is the biggest challenge we have is to keep people keen, or to make people to change. It's cultural change what it's all about, because a lot of people that work for our company have been there many years and actually started their working career in rail. If I tell you that we do an annual event called the Long Service Awards, where we invite all our employees who either have done 25 years or 40 years of service in the rail industry. And last year I had 187 London Midland employees, either with 25 years or 40 years, and their partners at the event. So that's how loyal people are. Some would say, yeah, but if I was on 50 grand a year, then I'd be loyal. Fair enough, fair enough. But that is how loyal a lot of people are to the rail industry. But they've been there many years, seen many changes, and they get to the point where they say, oh, I can't possibly handle more change and more change and more change. What we try to do is put the focus far more on customer service, on service provision, than operational railways. But that is hard, that is tough. And because of the unionised nature of the industry, it's everything you want to change, you have to sit down, negotiate with the trade unions. And so it's, yeah, it's a battle, but it's enjoyable at the same time. Because, you know, being here tonight is great, isn't it? Yeah.
Well, guys, I think I'd like to join you.
Oh, thank you.